Hello, folks, and welcome to week number 5 and the beginning of chapter 4 for Intro to Theater. Just some quick housekeeping things for you to take in before we get going today. First off, this is going to land right after you've handed in your first theatrical experience paper, so I'm excited to see those and looking forward to reading what you've been discovering. Also, our midterm exam is coming up. It'll be due February 26th, I believe. It'll be posted later this week. Enough time for you to hopefully digest the material that you'll learn today, because that will also be on the exam. And the a significant part of this will also be reading a play for the first time and trying to incorporate everything you've learned into reading and synthesizing a play that you will not have seen. So just wanted to throw all that out. That I know, recognize that it's kind of the big 2 weeks and you're about to head into midterm break. So just wanted to say, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out. I'm going to try and keep as diligent as I can on all email channels, and I look forward to reading your first theatrical experience papers. All right, so let's get going. This is Chapter 4 in Theater Collaborative Acts. Understanding the play, and as you'll see with our wonderful themed slideshow, this is a theatrical blueprint of understanding plays. This is pages 76 through 98. So first things first. We got 6 elements. This is according to the Aristotle's Poetics. Of course, we always love the Greeks, but they really did, and particularly Aristotle's Poetics has framed the structure and our understanding of what drama is for the last over 2,000 years. We do love to reinvent the wheel, of course, so we'll talk about some of the current trends around the understanding of structure and all of these elements. But as you can see, there are 6. There's plot, character, thought, language, music, and spectacle. All of this, of course, remember, is in the framework of Peter Brook's Empty Space is sort of overlaid over top of this understanding. So we are always sort of revising our thought about what theater is. Peter Brook wrote his almost 70 years ago, now 50 years ago, and of course this is much later, over 2,000 years ago in ancient Greece. But a lot of it still holds true in sort of encapsulating all of that we understand about what theater is, and particularly when you're looking at overarching plays around the whole thing. So plot, number 1. Is the organization of the action. It's not necessarily the action itself. It's not a list of events, but it is sort of an overarching organization of what happens in a play. It gives the play its unity, and particularly for those of us making theater, it helps us understand how to craft something that is cohesive, and if it's a 2-hour play, that hour 1 doesn't feel different from hour 2. That minute 1 doesn't feel different from the final minute of the play. It can also be called structure, if you'd like to think about hanging the play on top of the plot. That's one way to think about it. So each play begins with a beginning stasis and an ending stasis. I like to think about drama in general is a asymmetry or something that has tension and conflict. The book mentions conflict as sort of the main driver, and for me, stasis is the balance that the book talks about. Right, that there's this sort of evenness, that it's not tottering like a seesaw, but it's just an even plane. And each play hopefully begins and ends with that sort of resolution of, well, this is what the world is before the play begins, and at the end of the play, this is what the world is after the events of the play. And then we also have to take into account the point of attack of when the story is taking place. We'll talk a little bit more about that, but it's when and what the playwright or the makers of the play are beginning the telling of the story within the grander scope of the narrative of the characters. Um, there's an inciting incident, so this is what makes the play go. We'll talk a little bit more about that when we look at the actual linear structure of things. And every plot structure, according to Aristotle, has a structural climax, and so we'll talk more about that. But these are the main sort of points that we're drawing lines towards, so that we always want to look when we're reading a play, when we're watching a play, you can sort of dissect and identify each of these parts. So let's take a look at this on a graph. So this is a structural graph that you may have seen in any sort of literature class. This is coming straight from Aristotle. If you've looked in your English class in this sort of plot structure. For the theater, we're talking about emotional intensity on the vertical axis and dramatic time on the horizontal axis. Point of attack and the beginning stasis sort of take place at the beginning. I like to always use Abraham Lincoln as sort of the explanation of point of attack. So if we're telling the story of Abraham Lincoln's life, a early point of attack would probably be, the Lincoln family is welcoming this baby into the world. The doctor says, Mrs. Lincoln, you have a child, and there's a baby Abraham. Very, very, very early point of attack. A midpoint of attack, or a media res, would be the Latin term that I always learned, would be maybe Lincoln running for office in the Illinois Senate, or starting his presidential race. And so Abraham Lincoln is he's got a lot of life between him and the end of the play, but he also has a lot of life that's happened before the play has started happening. And then late point of attack would be, if we were watching O'Mary, it would be Mary Todd Lincoln running into the Oval Office saying, Abraham, are we going to the show or aren't we? And so we know that there's a very little time between the beginning of the play and the end of Lincoln's life. And so that's the concept of point of attack, and knowing that particularly in theater, in live theater, we have a limited amount of time to tell stories. And so framing and knowing how we're managing time within a story is very important, and something playwrights think about, and particularly those of us who are trying to live life. If it is an early point of attack, the book says that it's often episodic, which means that we're looking at small little picture frames within a person's narrative. And it's because it would be really hard, in fact, impossible, to take a linear story and tell it all the way through if you're beginning with an early point of attack. So between the beginning stasis and the inciting incident would be the exposition. And this is basically giving information, things you need to know before we begin ramping up that emotional intensity, which begins with the inciting incident. This is the protagonist's recognition of they're moving towards something. A crisis, and I always learned that the inciting incident is a textual line. It could also be a stage direction, but it's something that is written down. It's not an invisible thing that an actor makes up. It's very much something that the playwright has placed in that sets the ball rolling down the hill, and we start gaining emotional momentum. Which enters into a series of conflicts, raising action as the emotional intensity increases. This is actually a 2-point where maybe we rise to a certain point midway through the play, and then we get a nice little breather, the audience does, and maybe the actors do as well. And then it ramps up again, and the emotional intensity gets even higher until we reach the climax. So the book is using Romeo and Juliet. You can use Romeo and Juliet if you like. Depending upon what the protagonist's main line of dramatic action is, the verb that they are chasing, which, if let's say that it's Romeo, it could be Juliet, it could be both the lovers against the world, which is also makes it harder and sort of muddies where the inciting incident is. But Aristotle asks us, and of course he's writing this about Greek drama, where there is sort of one Antigone or Oedipus, where it is one character. We're still dealing in very early drama. It's still being developed in how we understand these things, but these characters sort of have they call it a dramatic flaw or a mortal flaw that they, in tragedy, where they're set on the road toward their inevitable end and they reach it at the climax. They have a recognition and reversal. It would be catharsis, it would be the Latin term for this, but this idea that the protagonist recognizes that they have been on this path for the entire play, and then they have some sort of emotional, intellectual fate reversal in, oh, I've been doing this wrong, or oh, it's been all for this, and I have the thing that I've been pursuing. They recognize it, and then there's some sort of reversal that happens, and then we take a falling action down to an ending stasis where the world has found a new equilibrium, a new balance. We're no longer in conflict after this, or perhaps we recognize that there's going to be more conflict, but no longer as a scope of this story. And the audience can feel it, the characters can feel it, that somehow or other we've reached our inevitable narrative end. This is also very strictly a linear or causal plot structure. So this is taking into the assumption that each thing bumps into another thing and causes action to always be moving forward. I'm looking at myself in mirror this image, but that we're always going in a certain direction, and each event causes, as Newtonian physics would say, an equal and opposite reaction, that somehow or other we're always bumping into each other. The book points to conflict as the thing that makes this go, and I believe that's true, that we, just as pendulums swing back and forth, we reach something and then something else bumps us and we go the other direction. So that's where causal comes from. And linear is just that we're beginning at the beginning of the story and making our way to the end of the story without any sort of rococo movement, either back in time or leaping from point to point in the story. In this kind of linear structure, there is a structural climax. This is, again, as I said before, this recognition and reversal. There can also be, and this is something that isn't in the textbook, but something that I learned in my acting and directing classes, that there also can be an emotional climax that may correspond with the structural climax, where the character has that recognition and reversal. But it can also happen somewhere else in the timeline. Often it happens before the structural climax, where the audience feels this sort of overwhelming emotional tension that reaches its peak. And then the character has that structural climax of recognition and reversal. There can also be, and this is, few and far between, when that emotional climax may happen after the character has that structural climax, in the protagonist recognizing, oh, my worldview is entirely changed, and the world cannot be the same after this climax. And then there's an emotional climax, perhaps. Fewer plays, at least fewer traditional plays, have this sort of climax placement, but it's something to keep in mind when you're trying to diagnose and dissect a play and analyze it. I mentioned these things before, but just labeling the parts of the structure. The beginning, between the point of beginning stasis and inciting incident, is the exposition. From the inciting incident to the climax is the rising action of the drama, and after the climax to the ending statement is the falling action, or denouement, that lovely French term. So there can also be subplots along with this, if there are secondary characters that somehow or other mirror the action of the protagonist. these secondary plots often reach a climax at the same time. They often are comic characters that might be offering a palate cleanser between the real drama of the world. If these characters are very funny, they come in and lighten the mood. If the mood keeps getting is full of pathos, that sometimes these comic characters come in. And oftentimes, Twelfth Night is another one in my mind that I love very much. That they reach a climax at the same time that the protagonists, the main characters, do. So there are ways to play with this linear structure. A cliffhanger would be one way. That's where we reach the climax, and then that's it. Goodbye. And we kind of leave this empty space. There is no falling action. I often think about this as like sort of French film, where they just go, and we're not going to tell you how this ends. And you just sort of have to either guess. The character kind of reaches the reversal point, and then we never see or the recognition point, and we never see the reversal. We never see, and that's how it ends, a happily ever after wrapping up. Another way that we can play with this structure is a flashback, where we're not playing with linear time. We start messing around with time. I didn't show the sort of episodic jumps, but a flashback would be going back into time. And then we still raise that emotional tension, but it's happening as we jump back and forth in time, telling us part of the story, not in linear progression, but I understand why this is happening because it's happened in a different time than happens in the linear narrative. So one of the things that the book, the fun little pop out in the book, is the Deus Ex Machina. This takes place in modern storytelling as well, but particularly in Aristotle's world. Deus Ex Machina is the machine of the gods, where the gods come down and resolve the story for the protagonist. That's not necessarily the protagonist, but the gods say, hey, we're going to fix this, and somehow or other that spurs the climax and leads us either to our happy ending or the tragedy. I should also point out that in Aristotle's idea of tragedy, this is a recognition and reversal of inevitable tragedy of if you're talking about Oedipus or Romeo and Juliet, that we were destined to fight against our stars, but because we've been tempting to fates, the fates have laughed at us and we receive our just deserts. We die, or we kill our father and marry our mother, if we're talking about Oedipus. If we're talking about comedies, often, at least in traditional comedies, and these are very human stories, the lovers who have been striving, finding a girl, losing a girl, finding a boy, losing a boy, finding a boy, losing a boy if you are a boy, whatever those narratives are, and you reach the climax, you realize, oh, we've been struggling and we do love each other, we live happily ever after, and then there's marriage and babies. That's very often the traditional outcome for comedies up until recent times, and you would even see Merrick. David Merrick was a producer in the Restoration at the time of Charles II, kind of after theater was banished from England with the Protestant Reformation. And Merrick came back and started producing during this time and made the happy ending of Romeo and Juliet, where Romeo and Juliet live happily ever after. It is absolutely a convention that we don't see any longer, but it was not unheard of to take those tragedies and turn them into happy endings. So there are other ways to organize structure other than this linear or causal plot structure. They often are derived from other Eastern traditions or other non-Western types of theater that have sort of seeped into our storytelling. But we very well see these sorts of different kinds of organization in our modern contemporary plays. The first one would be a situational structure. The play or the book mentions rasa, or this idea of harmonious moods that are arranged to make a pleasurable experience, pleasurable storytelling narrative. You could think about this as sort of like a trance or like something that you wash over you. It would be less linear, but it would also, it still has a progression of some sort. We don't want to think that it's just the same thing over and over again.
Similarly, there is conditional organization. This is an image from Pittsburgh Irish Classical Theater's production of Waiting for Godot. Dee Dee and Gogo here are the characters. And these two are on a road waiting for Godot. And Godot never comes. And so the play is organized through this process of and condition of just waiting. There's very little movement linearly, and that is the point of the show, waiting for something grander to take them out of themselves, and it never arrives. Similarly, we got choreo poems. This is a structure that is more literary based. Very often it's an art form that came around middle of the 20th century, looking at movement and poetry and the speech styles out of rap, but also spoken word, poetry slams, and taking these bigger ideas around identity or condition and writing. Similarly, this sort of harmonious mode of and poetical language and structure that makes it go. This is an image from For Color Girls. It's taking place at River Stage if you want to check it out. You can also structure these narratives around ideas or characters. This is an image from Assassins by Stephen Sondheim. The whole show is an episodic progression investigating what it is to be an assassin, the psyche of what it takes to murder someone for political means, and what sort of personality is attracted to the act. It is not. It does have a climax, but it is not something that where we see cause and effect bumping into each other. It's more an exploration of a single idea. We also can have repetition. This is an image from the musical Groundhog Day by Tim Minchin, after the movie with Bill Murray. Of course, if you know that movie or the musical, the character is spending his entire time living through Groundhog Day, the same Groundhog Day over and over, and his character progresses through the span of time, discovering what that is. And then lastly, there's post-structuralism, where we are playing with meta-theatrical ideas. This is an image from Marat Sade, where the play itself takes place in an insane asylum in Paris after the French Revolution. And and it follows, again, an assassination attempt. And the characters argue about why they're telling the story and who they're telling the story for, which interrupts the linear and causal structure. We do move through time, but it is very often interrupted by the task of telling the story more than the characters themselves living emotionally through the story.
Now, of course, as human beings, we want to change things up. We want to switch things up. Of course, each generation feels like somehow or other they have a new idea. And so there are different kinds of ways to structure things in the 21st century. There's performance art, which is similar to choreo poems, but taking other art forms and adding in an audience and a live experience. There's the immersive theater. We all watched the video. I was really interested to see some of your responses to that video. But this idea that the audience is not, it can somehow impact the way the protagonist's story goes. There's also in the current this kind of zeitgeist is this response to digital monopolization of attention, where because we always have our phones and they're always asking our attention, the theater somehow or other has to shift or change in order to capture the attention of people. So I think the initial pendulum swing was this hyper hyper focus on human connection. Turn off your phones. How dare you use your phones? We're human and we're breathing, and you should be paying attention to us. That's one way to go about it. There have also been attempts at interactive experiences with your device where you may comment as an audience member, choose your own adventure, or you can comment on the action and your audiences see your response, and it's part of the live experience. There's also a really interesting movement right now as technology moves forward with augmented or mixed reality. Ian McKellen is currently on Broadway with a play called An Arc, where you put on a pair of glasses in with an audience. They are clear glasses, but they are like Google Glass, and there's an augmented reality where you're seeing a play that only can be seen through the glasses you're wearing. It's still a live event, but it is not. It's not the traditional form, and of course, inevitably that's going to impact the way that a plot is structured as soon as you add a different lens for the characters to work through. Speaking of characters, that is our next of the 6 elements, number 2. This is a fictional person who performs action in a play. You've heard me say this a bunch of times, but the protagonist is the main character throughout the play. Antagonist is someone who tries to serve as an obstacle, or perhaps is trying to get the same thing that the protagonist is trying to get and looking to thwart them getting it as opposed to them getting it. There are character credibility. We talked a lot about this last class about what makes a character credible or believable. This is in line more about whether the author, the playwright, has offered us characters that we trust to tell us, the audience, the truth. That it's someone to be believed or someone not to be believed. And as we're going through the narrative, the journey of the protagonist, whether or not we should invest our time and energy in each of these characters. Something that can, lives on that spectrum of whether I believe them or whether I don't. Kind of levels of characterization that the playwright can define are biological. Seems like a very simple thing. We are telling stories about humans, but in many plays, there are non-human characters. This is a play from Dragons Love Tacos. There is a dog and a child that run into a bunch of dragons who love tacos. So there is a dog, and then there are dragons. That's something that can happen, and a character can fit a different biological form via the playwright's imagination. Physical characteristics. This is a image from Vanya, Sonia, Masha, and Spike, which is a very funny play by Christopher Durang. It takes place, it's a bit of a riff on a Chekhov play, but Vanya, who is the bearded gentleman on the left of your screen, is sort of a middle-aged gay brother of 2 sisters, and into their life waltzes Spike, who is the masculine specimen on the right of the picture, and that contradiction is a mirror and creates a lot of fun and comedy, because Vanya is incredibly smart and feels like the world has passed him by, and Spike is not incredibly smart at all and is just the world is his oyster because he doesn't expect or know that the world would be anything else. There's the psychological and emotional story, actually, I just sort of outlined along with the physical, that these characters have different psychological or emotional states. This is the Book of Will, taking place in Buffalo. Clearly, there's a character having a really hard time and a character having a lot of fun. And these things can be at odds and ultimately create conflict for the plot. And then there's social levels of characterization. Here's a collage of Hamilton with King George and all of the revolutionaries. They are in different strata in time, history, and in the play. That they are, the way that they reflect their ideas, the songs that they sing, or the way they interact with each other shifts greatly because they are on different social settings, social footing. And then the ethical, or where our moral understandings of the world and how we should behave within the world can change the way a character behaves within a plot. This is an image of Tartuffe by Moliere. Tartuffe is a character who feigns righteousness and then ultimately behind closed doors, when he doesn't think anyone is looking, is wooing the wife of one of the main characters. And of course is ultimately found out, that climax of the play. And so the ethical standings of all the characters has a lot to do with whether or not they feel hypocrisy needs to be punished or whether they should be let go. Another way that we understand character is in juxtaposition to other characters. Of course, we have a network of relationships with different people and behave differently with different people in our lives. Characters are the same way. So whether or not we even see characters in the play with other characters, there are often given circumstances of, my family thinks this way about me, and so if I enter into a marriage with this person and we have a baby, they're going to have an opinion about it. This past relationship to the present, like, well, we had this kid, and back when my parents didn't approve of it, now we have to deal with that in the present, and then how the impact of those relationships bounces off of others. So if a character has gone through this in the past, that they may or may not behave the same way in the future, and that will impact their relationships with other people. So that all sums up into number 3, thought. We have hopefully plot and character and the way that they progress through a narrative can present a bigger idea to the audience and to all of us of what it is to be human. We've talked a lot about this. This is the ideas in the play. The means of creating thought can happen through textual imagery, if we're playing with Romeo and Juliet. But soft what light through yonder window breaks, it is the east, and Juliet is the sun being a star. Romeo often rails at the world that he will defy you stars, that somehow or other the celestial orbs have defined what his life will be, and he finds his own star. And so those textual images can tell us who these characters are and how they're going to behave. There can be direct expression. This is the idea. We talked about Brecht quite a bit, where there's no beating around the bush. I'm going to tell you exactly what this play is about. This is what you should be thinking about. Expressive language, the way people talk, if they are speaking in lyrical, flowery language, it might send you toward truth and beauty and artifice. If they're speaking violently, if they're always at war with one another, if they're always in verbal sparring and it's brutal, it might take you down a different path of thought about the brutality of human behavior. Why do we fight? Where does that war come from? Is this a primal thing? Is this something that is just who we inevitably are? So expressive language and the way that we talk can lead us to bigger ideas. Of course, plot, the story itself, how the story is structured, can lead us toward those bigger ideas. And then visual images, the way designers and actors present the story can also change the way we think about things. And then illusion. Some of you got to see Radiant Vermin that I was in at BTE. This is a play about unhoused people, and we had talkbacks after a lot of the shows. And just the fact that we were doing this play now, and the political things that are in the air, a lot of folks we wound up talking more about immigrants and immigration and ICE and the way the government is currently treating folks who may not be unhoused, who may very well be housed, but who somehow or other we think of as outside of our tribe. And it was interesting because we never mention immigrants at all in the play, but because there was some connection to be found between unhoused people and the immigrant population, that's where a lot of the audience members' minds went. They alluded to, in their own imaginations, this parallel. And the allusion can be another way of creating thought. All right, language. Language can establish a bunch of different things. This is number 4, by the way. Character traits. I know a character because of the way that they speak. A mood or environment. This is similar to me saying if people are talking angrily and loudly, it can set a certain mood and environment, or if they're talking quietly and intimately, you might think differently about them one way or the other. And then the general quality of the world. Again, if you're using big heightened language, if you're using prose, then it might lead us one way, or poetry, it might lead us the other. This is a big distinction in drama because of the way playwrights write. For a long time, from the Greeks all the way up until basically the 18th century, poetry was sort of the means of playwriting. We weren't seeing a whole lot of prose. I guess the Restoration would have had a significant amount of prose. But even Shakespeare and the Restoration folks were using prose as a lower echelon of communication. So the status of verse, that there's a heightened language, these people are speaking with authority and with high artifice, that somehow or other this is a higher, or Apollonian, I mentioned last time, this Apollonian ideal of I'm registered my thoughts in a very heightened way. Prose leads toward the exaltation of the vernacular, this idea that it's just everyday life, man, and I'm just talking the way everybody else talks. And by putting it on stage, somehow or other, I'm raising up this everyday life into something worth viewing, something worth considering on stage. Blank verse sort of splits the difference. Blank verse is not rhymed. This is what Shakespeare was writing in mostly when he was writing in verse, iambic pentameter, where we have that sense of heartbeat, and it masks the heightened verse in a way that sounds more and more like human speech in the way that we talk. I just did it in the way it heightens human speech in the way that we talk, right? You can hang vernacular speech on iambic pentameter pretty readily. And even today, if you're doing plays by Sarah Ruhl or Lucas Nath, these are modern playwrights that use poetry and verse to structure what sounds like human speak, similarly to iambic pentameter. They're actually written, you look at the page, it looks like poetry. And really it's a way to craft the way human beings think, the way they speak, and these playwrights use poetry to illuminate that. Figurative language can happen in verse or in prose. Metaphor, by speaking as if something is something without as or like, just that it is. That this book is everything I believe. Not the. It's not like it contains everything I believe. This thing is everything that I believe. Whereas simile and hyperbole use juxtaposition. So this world is like an ocean. There are fish everywhere. Hyperbole would be I am warring against this world like sand wars against the ocean. Like that huge idea somehow or other illustrates my state. Sensory imagery actually is kind of what I was just talking about with sand against an ocean. What does that feel like? What sort of overwhelmingness lives in that language? Number 5 would be music. Music certainly there is a musicality in language, but taking that even further, that when music enters into the world, of course, we know musicals in Western American musical theater, but so it can increase emotional identification. That happens if I start singing a song uh, about how much I love someone, how much I hate someone. Uh, the opening lines of Hamilton, for some reason, are the thing that bump into my head. How can a bastard orphan son of a whore and a Scotsman dropped in the middle of a forgotten spot in the Caribbean? Like, there's some sort of rancor. I know exactly what Aaron Burr is thinking because of all of the ugly words that he's describing Hamilton as, right? Setting up inevitably where he will wind up from the very first words that he speaks in the musical. It can express heightened emotion. If we're dealing with musicals, of course, I can speak what I believe, and then I can't describe what I want to believe by speaking, so I have to sing it. It can interrupt emotional development, where I need to think about something for a second, and so I sing my I Want song. Or I have two choices that I can make, and I need now to stop the structure of the play. Instead of picking a choice, I'm going to take a moment and think through everything that I need to think through before I make my choice, interrupting that emotional development in song. Of course, I'm talking about musical theater. Music can also happen in underscoring in a straight play. It can happen I'm sorry, I'm gonna keep talking about Radiant Vermin because it's what's on my head. But we had a live guitarist on stage who underscored a lot of things. When things would start to get intense, you would know they would begin to becoming intense by the guitarist starting to play or offer some magical element because the music was starting to inform what was happening. Also, understand music, and actually this is where music and spectacle sort of blur together as elements, the line between them, because as soon as you start offering sound design, that auditory thing, you start entering into spectacle in a certain way. It's more than just the actor speaking the language or telling the story. It can contribute to mood. Oh wow, I got knocked in the face. That's tragedy. Or, and that sound effect informs why I got hit, number one, and also whether you should laugh or whether you should be, oh my gosh, that character just got smashed in the face. So it can give information about character. It can also give information about what's going on outside. If it's sound effects, wind, rain, blustery tempest of music happening outside. It can also tell me if it's fast music and it's galloping, that the action is moving forward rapidly. Or if I'm moving very slowly as an actor and that music is still galloping, it can give you a sense of what's happening in an internal state. I can cause action when we're playing sound effects. Oh, my phone's ringing. I have to go get it. So all of a sudden, something is happening because of that. It can also contribute to thought. Similarly, as I was mentioning, juxtaposing music that wouldn't necessarily fit with a particular action can alert me to, oh, I should be thinking about this. This is significant. Let's continue to talk about spectacle. Spectacle may include scenery. This is a beautiful picture of the revival of She Loves Me a couple of years ago, prior to COVID. Huge set that moved and changed. It was just gorgeous, this sort of celebration of Art Nouveau style interior design. And it certainly gave you a sense of location and the sort of, it's a big love story. It's a love, it's a greeting card to love and to whimsy. And She Loves Me is exactly that. And so scenery certainly impacted and provides. It happens inside a perfumery shop, a ladies' store, Marichek's store there. And that element opened up, and there was an upstairs. It was huge. It was a tremendous set. I love that show, and I love that set. But scenery can certainly provide spectacle. And it doesn't have to be that simple. It can just be the fact that there is something more than the actor, the space, and the audience. that the actors play on. So scenery can be spectacular, but it is spectacle if there is just some scenery to explain what's going on. Similarly, props. This is an image of Clue, where props are very important because these characters are holding these implements and recognize that someone's going to die, and so that makes things happen. They could be mimed, but it's even more impactful when those props have weight and can show that they're going to be dangerous. Lighting is another way, either really subtly or in this case with great impact, to highlight what the audience should be looking at, how the characters are feeling. It's not necessary. You can do it in sunlight. That's how Shakespeare did it. But as we discover lighting and electricity and are able to craft it, that enters into storytelling in a really potent way. And lastly, costumes. This is American Utopia, a play or a musical that David Byrne created a couple years ago. It's an incredible show if you like David Byrne. It's streaming on HBO Max right now if you want to watch it. But the costumer put them all in identical suits with no shoes, and all you got are instruments and voices, and it's pretty spectacular. Spectacle can also include things that aren't design elements. They can be actor physicality. This is three different characters playing Richard III, who famously had a hump, and maintaining that hump or some sort of transformational physicality could be included as something that would be spectacle. Actors' movement, dance, or artificial movement that would not appear to be, you wouldn't see in everyday life, is a way to show things. And then makeup, things that dramatically change the way that an actor or a character moves and appears. These are traditional kabuki makeup. And once you put it all together, you got these 6 elements of a play: plot, character, thought, language, music, and spectacle. You can frame your ideas about hopefully any play and speak with some insight into the analysis of what a play means, why a play impacts you the way that it does. Hopefully it gives you some language to think and write about the plays that you see or the plays that you're trying to create. So all of these things impact and contribute to the world of the play. It often contains all. Sometimes it contains more or less of a particular one of these elements, but inevitably they collaborate to make the world of the play. So please take a moment to internalize all of this. I'm going to post 2 brief videos just sort of showing some of non-linear structure and other forms of spectacle. I'll be posting a play by Samuel Beckett called Play that has some pretty famous British actors in it. And I might also throw up a little bit of David Byrne's American Utopia, just to get everybody moving, and to understand movement and design in understated sorts of ways. All right, I look forward to reading your theater experience papers due on Monday the 16th, and keep an eye out for the midterm exam posting later this week. Hope you have a